This is the Northern Broadcasting Service, brought to you by the North Pacific's Ministry of Communications. I am Fiji Grande, and I am joined today by Brendog, Bobberino, Darcania, and MadJack. Today, we will be discussing the general elections, the recent flurry of activity in the executive staff, and the release of issue 26 of the Northern Lights. Before we get started, I'd like to note that participants in this news show are free to voice their opinion as they see fit. As such, the opinions expressed in this episode do not necessarily represent the Ministry of Communications or the North Pacific. So that aside, let's do some introductions and get started. Brendog, let's start with you.
I'm not sure Brendog's here.
Okay, Bobberino then.
I am Bobberino. I serve as the North Pacific's Deputy Minister of Communications under Minister Fiji Grande, Deputy Minister of Home Affairs under BMW Surfer, and I am also Deputy Minister of Defense under Minister Darcania. I serve as the North Pacific's Spammer-in-Chief.
We missed that last bit, Bobberino. Spammer in what?
Spammer-in-Chief.
All right, Darcania, you next.
I am Darcania. I am the North Pacific's current Minister of Defense, and I am also the North Pacific's Divine Floof.
All right, I'll move on to myself now. I am Fiji Grande, and I serve as the North Pacific's Minister of Communications, and I'm hosting this broadcast today. And now, lastly, with Mad.
I'm Keith, 43, 2 kids, support Millwall. I'm actually MadJack. Hello.
And he serves as the North Pacific's Minister of Culture, last I checked.
I do indeed.
All right. So with introductions aside, I think it's time to get started into the meat of this particular broadcast. First topic for today are the general elections that recently pretty much just got finished up. I'm not sure if Artemis has now officially been verified as speaker yet, but for the most part, the general elections have been. So
waiting on the official verification, but they won the election. Our ECs have just gone AWOL.
Yeah, that's what I thought I was waiting for as well. But I would have thought that they would have come out with an official verification in the last 2 days or something. So
it was initially delayed by Mouth and I being, as the temporary election commissioners, being slow to verify it. And at this point, everything's verified. We just have to wait for the results to be posted by the supervisors.
Thanks for that update. That does clarify things a bit. All right, so with that aside then, let's talk about the different candidates that we saw. Were there any surprises in those candidates? And then what were your general thoughts overall on the candidates who ran? Let's first talk about the delegate election, because I think that's sort of the most premier one of them.
Y'all should have voted for me. Changed my mind.
I think the obvious surprise candidate was, of course, MadJack, given that he was the lead on site on the nation-state's website for several years. But he managed to appeal his status, and now he has a nation in the North Pacific, and in fact ran for delegate in January.
He was definitely a surprise candidate in that regard, in that we wouldn't have predicted his campaign, just a few months ago. But since he has had that repealed, honestly, I felt like there was a lot of hype going behind you, MadJack. And so you were one of the few campaigns that I was certain was going to run.
Yeah, it was a little bit of an open secret. I'll be honest, since I came back, I had people asking me or telling me not to run because it was too soon. I guess it was. Ghost ran a very good campaign. Ghost, there was nobody else in the delegate election that would have won unless they ran a campaign like Ghost did. Ghost ultimately was considered the better candidate by the citizens of TNP, and I'm happy to serve under him because he's a good delegate and a good guy.
I feel that if Praetor had actually run as an actual candidate rather than basically saying, don't vote for me, I don't have the time. I felt that his campaign platform was exceedingly strong and even perhaps stronger than Ghost's, actually.
Yeah, if he had legit run, I have a feeling that he could have won the election. I don't know. Maybe he would have drawn some of Ghost's voters away from him and forced a runoff between Praetor and MadJack or Ghost and MadJack. I don't know. But maybe there's no spoiler effect there because his campaign, as promised, was very, very long, and wordy campaigns don't really have the same kind of appeal that shorter yet sweeter campaigns do. I don't know.
I actually have to disagree with that. I thought that his campaign was very well put together, and I almost appreciated the fact that he didn't have a TLDR after each section. I thought that was very professional in the way he did things, and overall I was impressed. I think that maybe overall it doesn't maybe appeal to all voters as much, but there's something about the way he did that showed that he was serious, and these were legit suggestions for future delegates, even if it wasn't, him.
To be fair, if you ever run for an election, you should always be, if you ever completely go through to voting, you should always be completely serious with just the idea, if I do win, I need to be responsible for this.
Yeah, that's a really good point. On the idea that maybe Praetor will take some of Ghost's voters, I think he has more of a spoiler effect for Ghost and for BMW, if BMW is a factor, than he does for me, because I did no outreach on the R&B. Ghost did a lot of outreach on the R&B, and that's where I think he made the difference.
Ghost won by a very slim margin. I mean, he only barely got a majority. I was expecting a runoff between you and him. Do you think that the R&B was actually where he got those extra votes?
Yes. Yeah, with the amount of people coming in who had very low forum posts, and with the work that Ghost did on the R&B, I think that's what swung the election in his favour. I think if Praetor runs, we probably have a runoff. I think maybe Ghost prevails anyway in a runoff, but I think there would have been a runoff.
One of the big surprises of this election is just how few votes, how little attention that BMW got. Because personally, I thought he had a pretty good campaign. It was just I think he got like one more vote than I did. And full disclosure, I ran on a platform of memes. So yeah.
Yeah, if there's one thing I as a voter regret during that election, it's not paying as much attention to BMW's campaign, just because MadJack and Ghost were the big two, and BMW was perfectly qualified for the position, but it was mainly like everyone just kind of knew that the main race would be between MadJack and Ghost. Like if BMW had campaigned more, he probably would have gotten several more votes. But it's hard to say now.
If BMW had been around, he would have gotten more votes. Yes, I agree. I don't think he was around enough to run a good campaign. Questions in this thread went unanswered, seemingly, for a few days.
Yeah, I don't know if he was around during that time, because I didn't see him on Discord or really anywhere during the time of his, after he had posted his campaign.
I actually didn't notice BMW's absence as much. I guess that was primarily because I was focused on Ghost's and MadJack's campaigns. I guess that's more my fault as a voter than it is his, but maybe if he had been around more, then I would have picked up.
I very much appreciate that that both MJ and Ghost did those debates over voice chat, where they kind of just said, hey, here's who we are, here where we go on like all these different stances, all these different scenarios, and we're able to get to a lot of other issues that we couldn't really address just over text on the forum. And I think that was really effective in drawing in voters, and seems like that conclusion is accurate based on the data.
I think that was actually a very interesting idea that they did that. Unfortunately, I missed all of the VCs where that occurred, and I felt that it sort of took away from me being an informed voter in that case because there wasn't a transcript.
I think in future, if I do them again, I'll probably record them and release them, much like we do the NBS, because they were really quite useful. And the only reason they happened was because we couldn't get a debate going because of everyone's time schedules. If I had wanted to debate BMW, I would have had to have been up at 8 a.m. my time, which sounds sort of reasonable, but my sleeping pattern doesn't allow that at all. Who knows? Maybe in May we'll be able to get an actual debate, because I don't know who runs in May, to be honest.
Ghost runs for re-election, and I don't know. We could get another diverse campaign, or another diverse. What's the word? Candidate.
How about the vice delegate election? How did you all see that going? Was it unsurprising that Sil Dorset won by as much as he did?
I actually predicted that Sil was gonna win the vice delegate election, but again, I was kind of surprised by how little attention Brendog's campaign got. I was kind of honestly shocked that I got 11 or 12 votes, when again I ran my campaign on nothing but a joke.
Combined with also running for delegate at the same time.
If you look down in Ghost's campaign, I don't believe I think there was a conversation between him and perhaps Mick Macedonia or someone, and MCM basically, if I recall correctly, asked him if he was blocking the delegacy to new candidates, and Ghost responded with essentially that he would not run for re-election.
It'll be interesting if he doesn't then, because that leaves the field just as open as, actually more open even than this last one, because from what I've been told, and this is hearsay only, Praetor's not around, or won't be around in May, and neither will BMW Surfer.
Alright, Bob, it's all up to you.
Okay, so I just checked, and it was Sawali who asked, if elected delegate, will you seek re-election in May? And what Ghost responded with is, no, he will not seek another term in May. And if he holds with his word, then that'll be the case, and it'll be an open election again.
It's always difficult to... The thing about second terms is you always want to continue the successes and build on them even more in your second term. It's always tempting to run for another term because you have that foundation set up from your first term and you can just continue along with it until your next term. But at the same time, it's delegate's just a stressful job,
I'd definitely love to see Ghost run again in May, because I think that he will be a good candidate then if his term now is successful. The thing is that then it'll be his fourth term in office, I think. And, I mean, there is a legitimate point there that he might be blocking the delegacy to others.
As someone who Ghost beat in the last election, I wouldn't mind if he ran again. Personally, I'm not a fan of term limits, but I understand why we have them.
I like term limits so long as they're not I like the idea of the term limits we have right now, where you can basically run for however many terms you want, so long as someone else gets a shot to build their own momentum going into the next election. If you get what I'm saying.
Yeah, I'm with Dark on that.
My understanding is that there are term limits, but that you can't run for more than 2 consecutive ones in a row.
Yeah, you can only have 2 terms in a row, and partial terms count as towards that number. So if you have like 1 week in the previous term because of reasons, then that's still a full term for that 2-term limit.
Yeah, all right. So I think to some extent we've sort of exhausted the delegate election topic. Let's move on to the speaker. Actually, let's do vice delegate first. We mentioned a little bit with Syl Dorset. Were there any other surprises?
I was surprised Bootsy pulled out. I think it was maybe a little bit that maybe they thought Brendog would be a more serious challenger to Syl, and maybe they thought that they were going to lose to Syl Dorset quite heavily.
Didn't Bootsy endorse Syl Dorset when he withdrew?
Yes.
Yes.
That'll influence the election quite a bit.
Yeah, Syl definitely won by a pretty big landslide.
I was surprised it was that big of a victory for him. Like, he's definitely qualified for the position, and it'll be good to see a numbers-based person see what they can do with it. But, I expected there to be more competition in terms of people voting for Brendog and even Bobberino.
I think what happened is everyone overestimated the appeal of candidates who were in the last administration. Like with both Brendog and BMW Surfer, I think people vastly overestimated their appeal to most people.
I mean, Syl was also Minister of Foreign Affairs.
And Syl's more visible than both of them because he's also an RP moderator.
So there's often the theory in TNP politics that running for the vice delegacy is sort of a stepping stone to the delegacy. Do you agree with that idea? And then, if so, does that mean that we can expect Syl to run for delegate in May?
I'm not sure Syl wants the stress.
Yeah, I disagree with the vice delegate could get you, enough knowledge and, enough game side presence and influence to help you get to the delegacy, if you go for it next. But at the same time, the skill set is still very different, and there's no guarantee that what you get, either in terms of skills or influence from the vice delegacy, will really translate into the delegacy.
You could always just do a relatively poor job as vice delegate and end up ruining your rep.
That's definitely true, but it also gets you very close in terms of endorsements, such that the transition is very...
That's one thing I kind of have appreciated over the last few terms, is we haven't been locked in TNP for
the transition really doesn't affect how people vote.
Alright, that's actually a good thing in my mind.
Yes. Back during, I think, Tomb's successful vice delegacy run, he just got back from being an NPA soldier, so it took him a really long time to get all the endorsements and influence he needed in terms of game side mechanics in order to actually take the in-game requirements of the vice delegacy. Didn't it take him 25 days or something like that? It took a really long time, and yet he was still voted in anyway because at the time, he was popular enough and had enough appeal.
And he was an expert in campaigns that promise a lot and deliver nothing.
Yeah, Doropia, did he even get to the in-game requirement of vice delegate?
I don't think he ever did, but I'm not entirely certain about that.
How did Doropia even win that election?
Dark was the only other serious candidate from what I remember, and Dark had pulled out of the race.
There was another serious candidate.
Noam was the other candidate, but I could be wrong.
Darcania, you were saying?
There's definitely at least one other serious candidate for vice delegacy beyond myself and Doropia. It was just, at the time, I was coasting off massive success as the Speaker of the Regional Assembly, and so if I had run, everyone just expected me to be the winner, even though I ran a purely joke campaign for it. But then I withdrew, and Doropia ended up winning all of a sudden without even really expecting it.
So it's your fault then.
Yes, it's my fault Deropia disappeared.
Ban.
So to bring us back to the present, I am actually somewhat impressed by Syl Dorset's campaign. I thought that what it lacked in promises, it made up for in the certainty that what it did say would most likely be executed. It wasn't one of these sort of hollow, promise everything and nothing is delivered type campaigns. And that sort of put us on an even footing, and I think is a big reason why he won the campaign.
Definitely.
So what are your guys' thoughts on the speaker election with Wondrous and Artemis and Denoy?
Dinoium.
Yeah, I thought it was Dino.
Yeah, we just call him Dino. Or Dino Mapping, if you want to make him angry.
Yeah, Dino mapping. I love it.
I guess I've just always pronounced his name incorrectly then. We'll go with Dino.
It was a fun campaign.
It's an election
It was
that
fun to watch
everyone's-
as an outsider.
I want to stay relatively quiet on this one because Dino was a previous deputy of mine, and so anything I say, I feel like, oh, Artemis is like, it's still happening!
Technically, yes.
This is the election that never ends.
No, that was September 2018.
Yeah, the September election was just unbelievably long. With the forum, and then, yeah, that was...
Oh yeah, with the forum's conversion into Tapatalk.
Ew, Tapatalk.
Yeah. Glad we're finally deleting that damn thing.
So maybe it is a little bit premature to discuss the speaker election then. Nonetheless, it still feels interesting to me. I did not expect it to go the way it did. I would have thought that Wondrous would have gotten a lot more traction. And I'm somewhat surprised that others thought his previous term went so poorly.
I'm sort of the opposite opinion. Like, I don't really have too many disputes with Wondrous, like, on a personal level. He seems a pleasant guy. We disagree politically, but that's neither here nor there. The thing about Wondrous is during his speakership, he made a number of very basic errors that I wouldn't expect a speaker to. Like, there was a few things that he did that an experienced speaker or a knowledgeable speaker just wouldn't have done. Like, whether it was to do with scheduling of votes, whether it was to do to how he used his deputies, or to points of procedure and stuff like that. It wasn't an outstanding speakership term, being honest.
Do you think that now that he has served a term, that if he had been reelected, he would have had that experience to serve a better term?
I'm not sure, because during the election, I'm pretty sure he made one or two, errors in procedure and scheduling and stuff again. I think he's someone who knows his own mind, and once his mind is made up that a certain thing should be run a certain way, it's going to be run that way, regardless of past precedent and how things have been done before. He wasn't a bad speaker, but he was an average speaker.
Do you have any specific thoughts on some of the programs that he started during his speakership? So on the one side, he did have sort of the parliamentary debate voice chat type thing. And then later in his term as a private citizen, he started a sort of a TNP political party, which was a little odd for him as speaker to do, I felt. Do you think that either of those really played a role in his campaign?
I think the latter much more than the former did. With regards to the former, my issue with that was, my main issue, I had two issues with that. The first one was that there was no one, when I did it, to argue against my bill. He didn't find anyone who opposed it, or who had any strong feelings about it. I feel like that sort of thing is better for, more contentious bills. And I think I and he were both expecting my delegate advisor bill to be a lot more contentious than it was. And the second thing was that he ran it like a political debate would be run. like if we had an election debate with like time limits and stuff like that, whereas I feel like a more like collaborative thing with people like just giving their perspectives would have been better. The party thing was kind of ridiculous as well. Like I just didn't understand that.
I agree when it comes to the Voice to Excellence program, as Artemis pointed out is the name of it. I felt that it was a little too regimented and divided up in time, where, you know, a more casual debate with both sides sort of speaking their minds would have been better. But it didn't really come up at all in the election. It seemed like, you know, it was just sort of a facet of Wondrous's campaign that just didn't come up, and I'm surprised by that because I thought that was one of the better aspects of his previous term.
I think the real kind of spanner in the works for the way the campaign went was really Dino himself, because he basically pulled votes away. He pulled votes away mainly from Wondrous, who most likely, I feel like Wondrous would have probably, sorry Artemis, would likely have won the election during it if Dino had not also run. But Dino was extremely good at campaigning, and he also appealed to the same group of voters that Wondrous would also have appealed to. And so by him also coming in and basically making the vote a three-way tie, that caused Artemis to get just a little bit more share of the vote so that Artemis could manage to get into the runoff. What I was surprised about was that Dino got into the runoff rather than Wondrous.
I'm surprised by the same things, but when you say that Dino was so good at campaigning, are you referring to his initial hostility in his platform to Wondrous? You know, he had the whole thing where he's like, I'm not here to insult Wondrous, despite the fact that he had just spent the last, you know, paragraph doing that? Or are you referring more to, you know, him on the offsite forums basically, you know, PMing just everyone, asking them to vote?
It was his platform itself and the way he conducted himself, both in his own platform and the platforms of other speakers, was definitely contentious. And if it were just up to that, his campaign would definitely have been the worst campaign. But he managed to whip up a ton of voters to his side with active posting on the R&B. I'm not sure if he sent any telegrams, but I wouldn't be surprised if he sent a couple. Talking about it whenever he could, especially pulling especially having some little text space, ask me anything in the citizens chat here on Discord. Basically, he managed to just rally enough people for him to get a significant share of the vote. And while I definitely disagreed with his campaign and how he was carrying himself in those campaigns, you really can't deny that he was able to whip up quite a few voters to his side just from his activity and his fervor in how he was getting people to vote for him.
I think outreach is super important in contentious elections, and doing the right outreach and the right amount of outreach will get you votes.
And I think Dino's campaign definitely proves that.
Yeah, he did a lot of outreach. He happened to forum PM me about, hey, who are you voting for in the speaker election? Did you consider my campaign? And I have a feeling that he did that with the mass of the citizenry. And given the fact that he made it to the runoff, and he was actually winning in the runoff before he resigned from that race.
He wasn't winning in the runoff before he resigned.
Oh, he wasn't? I thought it was.
No,
I think Artemis was up by 5 to 7 votes during that point when he resigned.
Yeah, it may have been closer, but he wasn't winning at the point he resigned. I think it was odd that he resigned, but I don't know. I get the feeling he never really wanted to be speaker, and he really wanted to be minister of communications.
That's the sense that I get.
Yeah, he probably, we can't really comment on his thoughts, but just getting his name out there makes it more likely that he get noticed for positions like that. or even just continuing on as a deputy minister in a bunch of different places?
Oh, he approached me, asked to be Minister of Communications. Probably approached Ghost as well, I'd say. But I was pretty clear from the beginning that I wanted Fiji to stay on.
Are there any other comments about the general election, or should we move on then to Ghost's appointments? Because I think that's the general direction in which this conversation is headed.
Well, is there any quick comments we wanted to make about Artemis's campaign, as well as about the AG race? The AG race was rather uneventful, but I think Artemis's campaign would be worth discussing as well, if we have any thoughts on it, just because we discussed both Wondrous's and Dino's campaigns.
I didn't follow it too much, but it seemed to be like, I'm the sane one. Whereas Dino's was quite Trumpian. In terms of, like...
Yeah, like, I'm a member of the common man, kind of.
Yeah, and like, in terms of hyperbole, and just, finally a humble nation for the role.
Yeah, that's literally, finally a humble nation for the job. That's literally a slow...
And his statement after he pulled out, like... I was leading when I pulled out, I would have won the election if I hadn't withdrawn, but like that sort of thing, that came off as very, very, very Trump-like.
There was a real dichotomy in my mind between Artemis's and Dino's campaign. When it came to Artemis, I felt that his campaign badge, first of all, was just spectacularly made, and the entire thing was very well thought out and put together. It seemed that he was suggesting, a consistent and stable term with sort of some experience coming to the position.
Yeah, I feel like for the speakership, generally the regional assembly prefer to have a nice, stable speaker who isn't too caught up in ambitions or anything like that. Like they do like a speaker that goes above and beyond their just standard do this job when you're legally defined to, but at the same time, that kind of subdued campaign, actually humble campaign, rather than being just called humble, that kind of campaign tends to be quite successful when it comes to speakership runs. It's actually how I became speaker in the first place.
I found that Artemis's campaign focused solely on sort of a return to the core duties of the role, and that those would be first and foremost fulfilled before any above and beyond action was. Yeah, and as to your earlier point, I actually didn't even remember to discuss the Attorney General election due to how uneventful it was.
The last AG election was a bit more eventful with not only the forum move, but also how the fact that COE was late to declare his candidacy, but it seems this time there wasn't really any competition for it, and the AG race tends to be pretty boring in general, to be completely honest.
So how do you view the AG role as changing or important within the North Pacific's political landscape?
It's not.
There's an honest answer.
I mean, it's not. Like in the past, we don't. Well, in the past, it was important when we actually put people on trial. We had trials and we had questions of constitutional nature that the AG could weigh in on. I mean, there's not been many of them recently. There's been fewer trials, and trials always seem to go bad for TMP. So the AG's office, you could appoint someone. Just appoint COE. Appoint COE, give it to COE for the next 2 years, or however long he wants it, and it wouldn't change. Nothing would
I would be
change.
Perfectly fine with that.
It's a nothing office, which is fine. It's there to be used when it's needed, but it's not been needed for a long time.
the thing with trials is that I have found, luckily I haven't had to experience any here in TNP, but I have found in my previous regions that trials tear communities apart, that people get very emotionally heated about given issues, and it just ruins regions.
I've seen one successful trial in my time on NS, and that was when in Lazarus I put the Grinch on trial for ruining Christmas, and we acquitted him because Christmas is a capitalist holiday, and the Grinch was just helping the worldwide revolution.
That's hilarious.
Oh, I guess Tomb's trial counts as well. Yeah, I try to forget Tomb because the mention of his name just makes me angry.
Sorry, I wasn't around for Tomb's presence here in the North Pacific. I do recall him through my interactions as a ambassador early on in my NS career, but could you sort of, I know this is pretty off topic, but describe what makes Tomb give you such a bad taste?
Tomb is the master of what I literally call the Tomb platform because he was so good at it, where his platform would be so unbelievably great that if he achieved half of it, he'd be the best ever in whatever role he had. And the electorate fell for his campaigns time after time after time. He never achieved even like a tenth of what he promised or what he said he would achieve. And maybe if you compare that to other candidates, that doesn't reflect that badly. But the way he reacted on the questions about what he wanted to do, and when people called him on him not achieving stuff, like he went missing when I questioned him about his AG goals and his AG promises that he hadn't kept. And it was stuff like that. And whilst he was delegate, he tried to make joining the MPA for Flamingovia conditional on him not criticising the direction the MPA was heading.
Yeah, that's a fair critique, I think.
He also participated in some extremely shady campaigning tactics, both in the regional assembly and in general elections.
Yeah, the best way to sum up Tomb is that he was an oligarchy project that went haywire.
So when you see campaigns, even today, that share that aspect of promising what feels like too much, you must obviously be naturally skeptical. But is there still the possibility that if you promise, 10x what other campaigns do, and then only achieve, a fifth of that you're still having a pretty decent delegacy, or whatever position you're serving in?
Yes, I think so, but I'm not sure we have any candidates that do that. I think much of what was good about the last election cycle, especially in the delegate race, is that both my campaign, Prater's campaign, and Ghost's campaign, and to a little bit of a lesser extent BNW's campaign, they were all largely policy-based and goals-based. And most of the goals and most of the policies were realistic and could be achieved in a 4-month term.
In general, I tend to feel that if you promise a whole bunch of things and then you only achieve a bit, even if you have done what other candidates would have achieved during that term, you've still sort of broken your promise to the people who elected you, and that just gives me such a terrible feeling.
I think that's a very valid point, and if we had a candidate that did that, I would expect that candidate, even if they were popular, to be questioned on that. Definitely.
Alright, so now that we've discussed each of the elections, let's discuss Ghost's appointments for each of the ministries. There's a few of us here today who are ministers currently, so let's let the others speak first before we...
Free me, I'm not a member of the minister oligarch.
So yeah, we've got Darcania, myself, and MadJack. So that's pretty much all of us here today who are ministers. So Bob, is there anything else you want to add before we go right into it?
You guys, all three of you guys have my full vote of confidence. MJ, I know you've been contributing to culture even during your DOS. So the fact that you're a minister now, I think that's truly amazing. Fiji, glad to have you back as my boss. I think we had a great term last term, and I'd love to accomplish some of the same stuff and push NBS even more than we've been doing so. And Dark, best floof. Good to see you as my boss again. Same thing. And I don't know. I want to see you work some of your magic.
Shall we go in alphabetical order for the ministries then, starting with communications?
Sure, that probably makes sense. So I've been appointed the Minister of Communications for the next term. In summary of what I intend to accomplish is, first and foremost, the Northern Lights. We're going to try to get 2 publications out, one at the start of March and then one towards the very end of this term in office. We're going to try to keep the same publication standard going, both in terms of content and aesthetic. And then, secondly, the North Star will be published on the month, hopefully, and we're currently making good headway in that regard. I think the content in terms of what the North Star presents is pretty lacking. I can't imagine anyone really seriously reading it, but I do think that it still presents itself as sort of a good way of keeping embassies updated on sort of government reports and what's been going on here. So there is still some inherent value to it. There's a little bit that we could improve with it, maybe improving the aesthetic as well, but honestly, with the content, I don't really know if that's worth it. Then with the Northern Broadcasting Service, I do want to keep going with news shows, but in general, we've gotten quite a bit of critiques on it that these are too long. We should shorten them and make them more frequent, such that they're a bit more bite-sized for listeners who don't have to block off a huge amount of time, and that we can then cover, future shows and other topics that we wouldn't otherwise get into. And I think just making it aim for a weekly basis with fewer people if necessary might make a lot of sense. And then another big goal, and I don't want to spend too much time talking about this, but another big goal would be for me and my deputies to be fully trained on all the aspects of the Ministry of Communications. So that's just a big push. We need to make sure that people are educated as to how to make these productions happen, such that after myself and Bobberino and everyone else currently serving in the Ministry of Communications is gone, these things can continue as planned. All right, that's Ministry of Communications.
Next alphabetically would be Ministry of Culture, unless one of us would like to comment on Fiji Grande here.
I think with the Northern Star, you could make it even more bite-sized. I'm not entirely sure as to the exact content it publishes now, but if you made it sort of like a bulletin thing, that I think would be, it'd be more striking in comparison to TNL, and it would maybe help it find its place more in terms of the content that the Communications Ministry puts out.
There's one thing I'd like to say about the Ministry of Communications. I've basically been involved in communications since back when I think Keish's first term as Minister of Communications. And Keish did a wonderful job. I loved what Keish did with the ministry. And I think his work, and I think it was Brendog who was another Minister of Communications, they really helped build up the ministry into a really solid foundation, monthly releases, all that stuff. Because before, Keish and the other people like that, the Ministry of Communications was just a dead ministry. Maybe you get two the Northern Lights releases out in its term if you're lucky. And what I really like about Fiji Grande is how much he's building upon that foundation, and not only raising the foundation higher, but also building all sorts of lasting monuments, as the analogy goes, with all the many projects he's doing, and he's tackling it with a bunch of, with just, yeah, I mean, I hate to gush about this, but I've been in the Ministry of Communications when it was a dead ministry, and I love what LFG Grande is doing with it. And I really can't overstate that.
Thanks. When I took office, or just before I took office, I made an effort to go through each of the previous editions of the Northern Lights and each of the podcast versions of the Northern Broadcast Studio. And I tried to make sure that I would be able to present content that could be published on a monthly or bi-monthly basis, and that is sustainable and is something that we can carry on far into the future. But I also wanted to take what already existed and improve that significantly. I feel like within all the ministries, the Ministry of Communications has the most to gain. I feel like it has the most potential to grow and become a better ministry. So I see my role primarily as just being one of introducing new content and new possibilities and building that to the point that when I ultimately leave the office, whenever that is, that I can have had a significant impact on the North Pacific for the better.
Anyway, I think that's enough gushing over our current boss. Shall we talk about the Ministry of Culture next with Minister MadJack?
Yeah, let's do that.
Yeah, I'm not doing nothing. Ministry of Culture, okay. We have, well, I wouldn't say big plans, but we have continuation plans for this term. Events will run as they've run in the past 8 months to a year. We're really good at events now. Asta is amazing at running events. We have Escade on board, who is also amazing at doing events. Between her and Pry, we hope to have the Ren Fair finally happen in this term. We've got plans for an R&B event as well. And there's also Flag Day at the end of this term, and we've got plans for that one as well. Big plans, so that's good. A little bit of an exclusive. Starting tonight, probably, a new series is going to be run by TMP Culture called TMP's Search For, and then a category, and we're starting with a big one. TMP's Search for the Best Media of All Time. Can be any form of media, you know, books, TV series, movies, music, video games, anything like that. And we're going to do it in polls after a nominations process. We'll have the nominations process, and then our 5 judges will decide what goes forward to the polling rounds. And eventually we'll find what TMP thinks is the best piece of media of all time. And then after that we'll probably do it again on the R&B to find out if there's a difference between what the R&B thinks and what the forum thinks. And we've got stuff coming up. We might do something with cards, but that's relying on discussions between various ministries and stuff.
Can we get a subscribe to PewDiePie?
Look, let me tell you something about PewDiePie, okay?
Here we go.
He's not the oppressed YouTuber that people are trying to make him out to be. He was shoved down our throats for like 2 years. That's why he's got 70 million subscribers. He's also not a very good YouTuber.
Thank you. Finally, someone says the truth.
Oh, plenty of people hate on PewDiePie. Like, when you're that popular, you will have haters. That's just kind of how it works. But
also subscribe to T-Series, they make better content.
okay, now let's pull it back into topic. MadJack, do you intend to either take advantage of the forces of spam or try and suppress the unsuppressible in your ministry as culture?
There is a planned spam week coming up. We've not really publicised it, but come Monday, we'll also be encouraging people to spam more and more and more, and I'll be bringing back the the Royal Rumble spam game that I did for a while.
Ooh.
And hopefully we can have a few more rounds of that in the next week. I don't know how many posts are out on the forum currently, but you know, yeah. We might do a thing where we'll delay the start a day, and so people can submit to us what their post count is at the start, so we can compare it to what it is at the end.
Right now, the forum shows 616,479 posts.
So let's get to 650,000.
All right.
Let's get to 750,000.
We can aim for that by the end of the term.
All right. Challenge accepted, MadJack.
So when it comes to spam, and this is a question that I've had burning in me for a while, yes, it gets people on the forums. Yes, it generates activity, but is that activity worth anything?
I used to think no. I now think the opposite. It's just a fun thing to do. It's the same as like just talking shit with your friends, basically. You know, and like you know, there are games that bring people together. There are games that people compete in. It's a really interesting dynamic, more than anything.
I used to agree with the idea that spam games are complete trash and shouldn't have even any role at all, but since coming to the North Pacific, I have found quite the opposite, in fact, that they can be fun. I just wish that they were better spam games, like more strategic spam games, if that's even possible. I don't know, just the sort of the count to 10 principle, or the count to 2020 before 2020, it doesn't really get me very excited.
We do have the tug of war spam games, and we also have the MadJack's few Royal Rumble threads. Those were fun as hell.
We could also maybe try and run like Mafia style spam games as well, but that might require us to split the games and arts forum in between like faster paced spam games and slower paced spam games to prevent it not being buried. But that's a discussion I think Culture and other people can have with forum admin.
I definitely look forward to Flag Day as well. I don't know what that entails, but it just sounds pretty.
We have a number of interesting ideas being thrown about currently. Asta will have more as we get closer, and you know, it's gonna be a really quite good one, I think. Hopefully we'll be utilising the TMP University to play around with some things as well. Maybe go a bit more in depth in the history of some flags and common disputes and concepts about flags, like what a flag should include, what it shouldn't include. That'll be like on the more serious side of things, and then there's also like more fun things, like less serious things that we'll also be trying to do as well.
When it comes to the university, I feel like it has to be somewhat NS related, because otherwise you're just going to be able to find that content, on Google and be able to find it with better information and more detailed information there. It has to be something that we're, inherently experts on. Like, I really loved Mouse Bumple's WA 101 course, because that sort of perfectly captures what I think should be in the university. Are there any plans for similar courses, say with, I don't know if it's relevant for, the NPA, but like how to raid, or sort of a better tutorial for each of the ministries, or this sort of thing?
We're having discussions. We're also going to be talking to TWP about some of the stuff that they're doing with their Ministry of Education. Their minister is Dali, who's been in TMP before. We have a really quite good personal working relationship, so hopefully we'll see some movement on that in the coming weeks. In terms of the university as a whole, Ghost really emphasised the importance of the university in his platform, and he put across to me really quite well just what we want to achieve with the university, and hopefully we're going to do that. We will be inviting outside people to come in and do things, and there's also people within the ministry who can. I do think that non-NS content does have a place in it. What I wanted to do with stuff like the On This Day threads was turn them into like more in-depth things. So instead of just copy and pasting from Wikipedia or wherever, like just a list of events that happened, I want people to commit to like post maybe 2 or 3 events or even just one event and just explain why they are important. Like, it doesn't really matter to me that on such and such a day the USS Liberty was bombed or something like that. Like, what, maybe someone needs to explain why that was important and the effect that had, or just any number of things. Why is the fall of Constantinople important? Why is anything important, basically? I think that should be the main purpose of those threads. But yeah, we do have plans to maybe have outside people come in and do lectures and stuff. Our RP event was really well received that we did last term. I don't think we'll see anything on issues, because most of the issues people would prefer that their knowledge gets shared on the main NS forum, which is perfectly fine. I think that's probably correct as well, but we can maybe reach out to Forrest and talk to the issue editors that are there. There's plenty of stuff that we have planned, and it's just a case of deciding what we want to do now and what we want to do maybe in a future term.
Syrixia in the Agora thread is asking if there can be more RP events.
I don't know if we have an RP event planned for this term, but there might be a few things in the pipeline depending on when I reach out to people, and if we reach out to people. Like, I very much want to get a lot of our FTs, of our future tech-based sci-fi stuff. I'd like to see sci-fi RPs coming across from NS site to maybe talk to us about concepts like Rule of Cool and just how hand-wavium works and stuff like that.
Alright, so next in the sequence of ministries, I believe, is the Ministry of Defense. Darcania, would you like to speak to your plans this?
I mean, naturally, there's only all too much I can talk about, but generally, I come from a background of come from a speakership background, basically. And I'm basically using that to influence how I tackle this Ministry of Defense term. Mainly, I'm not particularly a very ambitious person. I generally run for things or join certain positions when I see something that I feel like I could improve. And the main thing I see that could be improved about the NVA is mainly just streamlining and modernizing a lot of the infrastructure the NPA has. For example, just today, I actually modified the application for joining the NPA to remove some unnecessary fields. Like, it used to ask for your real life time zone determined just to see when you would be active and stuff like that. And also I removed the field that would ask which division of the NPA you would like to be in. Because we mainly have updaters, who are people that jump during updates, and pilers, who are people who join in and basically they're basically the reinforcements who join in after the updaters take a region and make sure that we keep the region. And it used to be that we would front load that information and say, okay, now which one would you like to join? And the thing that I disliked about that is, I feel like asking for that ahead of time, when new people aren't fully aware of how the game works, that it would basically be like asking for difficulty, asking like the difficulty of a video game before you play it. Like, you don't know how difficult the game is going to be. You don't know the game systems that you're going to have to deal with, so it's rather difficult to choose the difficulty that would be right for you. So people would just choose what they think is good for them, but for example, someone who's in the auxiliary may have actually performed better and had more fun as an updater. So I removed that entirely, and instead I'm focusing on letting people know the difference when they join and just letting them choose dynamically from there. Would they rather be an updater, or would they rather be a little less active and instead be a piler and join in and help us out then? The main other thing is mainly the NPA high command and officers have, like the mission logs, for example, which are public, as well as our own private roster. I've basically been working on making those spreadsheets that we use. Naturally enough, I came from a speakership background, so I've gotten very good at dealing with spreadsheets. And so I'm making those spreadsheets a lot easier to maintain, modernizing their design, combining different spreadsheets when they don't need to be separate things, all that sort of stuff, and basically making it so that more information is available for less work being put in to maintain that information. The other major thing is our roster right now is very officer heavy, people who stick around for a long time, who update a lot, who do a lot of update ops rather than more pile ops. We have a very strong force of updaters, enough that people, whenever we join operations with other regions, they usually comment on, wow, that is a ton of updaters you have. But as kind of an opportunity cost, we really don't have as many pilers as we do updaters. And while updaters do pile when we join a region, we really could use the extra auxiliary and work them out more and basically make use of the auxiliary more. And also, the other major thing is, of course, recruitment, which I hope to work with Home Affairs on. An officer-heavy corps, like a lot of our update ops, are mainly composed of a core group of officers who show up on every update. I'm hoping to recruit more people, and if they make officer, that's great, but just having more people to hang around with and realize how fun the NPA is and hanging out with everyone there, I'd really like to have more people join. So, combined with the more streamlined application and Home Affairs recruitment, I definitely hope that we'll be able to have more activity in the auxiliary while maintaining our activity in the updaters.
That does make a certain amount of sense. I wish you the best of luck during your term. I'm sure you'll do very well. There was a little bit of a topic that I believe Bob wanted to bring up about the adjutants that Laws had during his term. Bob, is there any way you could describe a bit of that program for us and talk about it?
So basically, I was an adjutant to the deputy, and I was Laws's appointment along with Owen Stacy. And basically, we were a training role for eventually becoming members of High Command. So basically, we did training about, okay, how do you update that XYZ did YZX op when, and learn how to put that in the log, or learn how to accept applications and send NPA info to those applicants. So then that's basically what we did. We trained for becoming members of High Command by doing some of the paperwork. This also gave us moderation powers over the High Command forum without being official members of High Command.
Okay, I just didn't really understand what that program was. Thanks for discussing that a bit. Is there, Darcania, do you have any idea as to whether or not you're going to bring that back, or do you have a specific reason for, if you're going to discontinue it?
I've discontinued it for this term at least. I have to see about if it's a thing that I want to continue, if I get appointed again, if it's something that I want to continue later on. But for this term, I've discontinued it. I've talked about how I'm changing a lot of the paperwork involved with the NPA, And so, for one, it would be kind of a bad move to teach people on the old methods, on the old spreadsheets, when I'm redoing a lot of that stuff in the background. I'm streamlining a lot of the paperwork and all that stuff. So that's part of why I didn't bring it back. And another part of why I didn't bring it back is because the adjutants, when I was a deputy, were mainly paperwork jockeys. Like, they already knew what they were doing, they were trained and all that, but they were kept on kind of just as paperwork monkeys. Like, for example, I refused to bring Dino back specifically because he was an extremely effective adjutant. Very active, accepted applications the minute they happened, put everything in the log correctly, all that stuff. So it was clear he already knew all that. So I didn't want to keep him on as a paperwork monkey if he wasn't going to learn anything. The adjutants are mainly a training role, and I want to make sure everything that they're being trained for would be up to date with my plans for it, and then make sure that we keep a constant rotation of adjutants so that people are constantly learning about all that.
Thanks. That does make a lot of sense. Bob just added that to the discussion topics, and so I felt it was worth covering, but that definitely clears things up, at least in my book. So because we don't have the other ministers present for Home Affairs and for WA Affairs, let's just comment a little bit on... Who? Sorry?
And for Foreign Affairs.
And Foreign Affairs. Oh, there's so many ministries.
We should just merge them all into the Ministry of Meme.
I doubt that would be a good idea. Do you guys have any thoughts on Ghost's appointments to those ministries, and how do you expect sort of the direction of those ministries to?
I expect World Assembly Affairs to maybe get a bit more efficient this term, and maybe get IFVs out. IFVs? I'm not sure which it is.
IFV.
Information for voters.
There we go. To get those out maybe a bit quicker than has happened in the past. Ghost seems really to be more like on it in comparison to the last term. I don't know if it was different previously, but just from what I can see, like he seems to be more WA. I don't know about focus, but like more just on ensuring things get out earlier than they have been.
Yeah, you tend to find that different delegates come from different backgrounds that favor certain ministries over others. And so I expect him to work rather closely with Brandog, the Foreign Affairs Minister, and Tilams, the WA Affairs Minister. I expect him to work more closely with them just because of his own knowledge on the subject and working together with those ministers. While for ministries where he's less familiar, like defense, he will contribute, but it won't be it won't be coming from as much detail and experience as he would for World Assembly Affairs, for example.
I also think that the reevaluation of the Home Affairs Ministry is important because HA sent out a lot of telegrams last term, and there has been some question as to whether or not there has sort of been a drop-off in their effectiveness over time, if we've sort of saturated the market in terms of the recruitment abilities there, and so maybe sending fewer telegrams might actually improve our odds. I don't know if that's the case, but doing some analysis and looking into that, I think, is going to be beneficial for the ministry in the long haul.
I think in general, telegrams have become more of an annoyance for people on nation states than they have become a benefit, especially for a region like ours that sends so many and has so many WA nations. Like, there are people who are just recruiting tag WA now, and they're doing it frequently. And there are people more willing to spend the money on SAMs to send tag WA telegrams to everyone. And, whether that's everyone in the region or everyone in the game, recruitment in general on nation states just seems to be entirely saturated at this point, and that's solely due to how easy it is to send telegrams to lots of people now, which, earns the site some money, I guess, but in the long run, it's not going to be worth spending the money on stamps for the vast majority of regions who are recruiting, and it might not be worth us sending so much, sending so many TBGs. I know we don't use stamps, and we have an appy and all that, but I think there probably needs to be a review of how much we're sending and what information we're sending.
I feel like that's sort of a perennial issue with Home Affairs. You need to be very careful with how you recruit, because there's always a bunch of different places that need more members, like the NPA or the Foreign Affairs Ministry. I hear they need more ambassadors. So, apply to Foreign Affairs and the NPA if you haven't already. And it's always a careful balance you have to strike. And I think now more than ever, that balance and easing up on it as much as you could while also getting everything you need done, that's probably going to be the hardest thing to do for this term for BMW, our current Home Affairs Minister. Because as MadJack said, there's a saturation in the telegram market. And just with all these recruitment telegrams going around, including not only just to new nations, but now like to tag WA nations, just spamming WA nations, no matter how old they are, with those recruitment telegrams. That internal recruitment via telegrams is becoming less and less effective, and even posts on the regional message board are becoming less and less effective just because there's so much activity in the message board that not many people will see it, just because that'll get drowned out with how many regional message board posts there are. So I think recruitment is going to be a major challenge for BMW this term, and I really hope that he finds a good balance with recruitment and just annoying people.
One thing that I think will be a pretty big focus this term will be foreign affairs, especially just given how adamant Ghost was in his campaign that TNP sort of take a more active role in gameplay. I don't know exactly to what extent that means that we're going to sort of participate in it, or if we'll just sort of make more forceful statements each time something happens in GP. But there's definitely going to be more of a shift in that direction.
I think he's got a good foundation to build on, based on the latter half of Sawali's last term. He made what is for TMP some very brave foreign affairs moves, deploying to St. Abaddon and coming out with a public and forceful statement about the MPO. Those are moves that I didn't really expect from TMP, just based on what I've observed over the past 12 months or more. Sawali's term was an FA success, I will say, and I think he deserves more credit for how during his 2 terms we widened our horizons and built a foundation on which we can both go out and be more forceful in gameplay, whilst also expanding our horizons further with, maybe this term we seek out new partners in terms of the WA, or new partners in terms of like sports RP or space RP or issues, or any number of things that you can't really look at our current allies and go, that's where we can go if we want expertise on that. And I think that's a really good part of Sawali's term that maybe people haven't commented on as much. But it was for me like really gratifying and stuff to see the treaty with Greater Dienstad come about, and the RP event that arose out of that as well. So Sawali's term was pretty good.
I look forward to seeing what Palaith will be able to do with that sort of momentum that he gained from Sawali's term. Because Palaith is a very experienced foreign affairs person, and I feel like if he sticks to his campaign and continues to follow the bravery that Sawali has done in foreign affairs, it's another thing where you got to strike a careful balance of making yourself a presence on gameplay and in foreign affairs without being too forceful. And I feel like Palith could definitely pull off that balance, because we don't want to become like the democratic first world nation invading the third world nation for its oil or anything like that to instill democracy. But I feel like under Palith, with the momentum that Sawale set up, that we could definitely become a strong presence in the gameplay sphere and in foreign affairs in general. And I look forward to seeing what Palith will be able to pull off.
I don't think that Sawali can be thanked enough for the sort of the momentum that he's put us under towards having wider horizons on the world stage. I think that there's a lot going for us now that he brought us. I really hope that Ghost continues that method, but at the same time, I do sort of question whether or not this is the right direction for the region. While I definitely see that it's bringing us a lot of credibility, I also think that we should sort of question whether or not this is where we want to go and get into before we get there. Is gameplay something that we actually want to be sort of more invested in, or is neutrality something that we've been benefiting from over the last few terms?
I think we have a pretty strong core identity to TNP, so that we'll be able to basically, even as we get more of a presence in foreign affairs and have more sort of cross communication with all that, I feel like our core identity, culture, communications, all that stuff, we'll be able to we have a strong foundation of self-identity and confidence in ourselves, and I think that'll really help protect us from the worst elements of foreign affairs and gameplay.
That's a solid point. Thanks for bringing that up. All right, so are there any last comments about any of the ministries or anything in general that you want to mention?
I should be Minister of Memes. Change.
Yep, and join the NPA. That's a big point too.
Really join any ministry you're interested in. It's really fun. It's really rewarding to get involved in.
Don't join culture. Culture's terrible.
I hear
definitely join a ministry if you want. It's not even too much work if you're just going to join a ministry. There's not much binding requirement. You can contribute almost as you choose. But it's like a matter of, it kind of, like Duck said, it kind of is a rewarding experience. It just try it out.
So here goes my professional appeal to anyone listening. Please join the Ministry of Communications if programs like this are something that you would enjoy listening to in the future. We definitely need more people, both as writers for the Northern Lights and as broadcasters for the Northern Broadcasting Service. So if you are at all interested in becoming part of this, please join the Ministry of Communications. All right, and then with that aside, Darcania, if you'd like to sing a song at the end of your broadcast, you may do so now. I think this is the time.
All right. As a bit of forewarning, this song was really popular a few years ago. So if you've listened to the radio a lot around 2009, 2010, you may have gotten this song stuck in your head then. And it is a good song, but I know how annoying it is to get something stuck in your head. So if you recognize the song and you don't want to get it stuck in your head, that's perfectly fine if you want to bow out now. But I've been listening to this song a lot, and I like it a lot, so I wanted to sing it.
So without further ado, here is Darcania. Off you go.
You would not believe your eyes if 10 million fireflies lit up the world as I fell asleep. 'cause they fill the open air and leave teardrops everywhere. You'd think me rude, but I would just stand and stare. I'd like to make myself believe that planet Earth turns slowly. It's hard to say that I'd rather stay awake when I'm asleep, 'cause everything is never as it seems. 'Cause I'd get 1,000 bugs from 10,000 lightning bugs as they tried to teach me how to dance. A foxtrot above my head, a sock hop beneath my bed, a disco ball is just hanging by a thread. I'd like to make myself believe that planet Earth turns slowly. It's hard to say, but I'd rather stay awake when I'm asleep, 'cause everything is never as it seems. Alright, I'm gonna stop there. That's all the lyrics.
Bravo, bravo.
Bravo.
Next time we should all sing along with you. That was
Yes.
great.
That was.
There's another
I can
verse to it. but-
kind of play piano.
And we can maybe edit in music in the background.
Yeah.
You're just giving yourself more work at this point, PG.
Nah,
Yeah, whatever.
If you want to hear our beloved Floof sing.
Yeah, next time I'll choose a song that I'm a bit more familiar with. I did mess up a few notes in that. I just rediscovered that song lately and wanted to try singing it.
That's alright. I thought it was fun. We can do this again in the future.
It's super
All right.
catchy.
Yeah,
It really is catchy. By the way, it became a meme. It was a meme for a while.
I can share the YouTube video in the Agora channel if you want.
Go for it.
There you
Yeah.
go. Lots of
First person I actually heard sing that for me was my then baby, who, just as any 5-year-old can attest to, she was really pretty, and I kind of had a crush on her.
You were hang on, when were you 5 years old?
Yes, sir.
Like last.
Oh, you're too young. Family young people.
Alright, so let's get this
I
back
was
on
5
track.
years old in 2007.
Let's get it back on track.
Alright, guys, thank you so much for listening to the Northern Broadcasting Service. We will conclude this episode now, and hopefully in the future make these shows much shorter. I know it's dragged on quite a while, but with that aside, thank you so much for listening. Enjoy your day, and enjoy TNP, because that's why we're all here.